This is the long history of a galaxy at war, told from the very start. It begins far in the past, long before any human walked beneath the stars. It reaches all the way to the Dark Age men, now called the 41st Millennium. The story is old, and it is heavy, and it moves slowly through deep time. So it will be told plainly, one step at a time, in order. In the beginning, the galaxy was young, and it was ruled by an ancient people. They are remembered now only as the Old Ones. No one knows for certain what they looked like. They were wise beyond measure, and their power was very great. They understood the stars, and they understood the world behind the world. For there are two realms in this story, and they are always close together. There is real space, the place of planets and suns, and cold, black distance. And there is the warp, a sea of raw thought and feeling beneath all things. The warp is where souls go, and where dreams and nightmares take shape. The Old Ones learned to sail this hidden sea with ease. They built a great network of secret tunnels through it. This network was called the Webway, and it spanned the whole galaxy. Through it, they could step from star to star without ever touching the void. For long ages, the Old Ones lived in peace, and life spread where they walked. The Old Ones did not stay alone in the galaxy forever. They shaped new peoples to serve them and to share the stars. They were master makers of life, and they made many kinds. They made a people of grace and long life, quick of mind and strong in the warp. These were the Eldari, though later ages would call them the Eldar. They made a rough and hardy people, green and full of war and laughter. These were the Krork, the distant fathers of the creatures called Orks. They made others too, whose names are mostly lost now. Each young race was given a gift, and each was given a purpose. For a shadow was gathering, and the Old Ones would soon need soldiers. Far off, on a cold and dying world, another people had risen. Their sun was harsh, and it filled their bodies with sickness. They lived short, painful lives, and they feared death above all things. These were the Necronter, and their whole culture was built around the grave. They raised great tombs, and they honored the dead, and they longed to live. In time, they looked out at the galaxy and saw the Old Ones living on and on. The Old Ones seemed almost deathless, and the Necronter grew bitter. They begged the Old Ones to share the secret of long life. The Old Ones refused them, and that refusal turned to hatred. From that hatred came the first great war of the galaxy. This war is remembered as the War in Heaven. It began roughly 60 million years before the Age of Men. The Necronter struck at the Old Ones across the stars. But the Old Ones were strong, and the Necronter could not win alone. Their war dragged on for years beyond counting, and slowly they were losing. So the Necronter went looking for a weapon greater than themselves. Out among the burning stars, they found the C'tan. The C'tan were beings of pure energy, older than any world. They lived in the hearts of stars and fed upon their fire. They were vast and mindless, like living flame with no shape of their own. The Necronter gathered pieces of them and gave them bodies of living metal. This metal was called necrodermis, and it held the star gods in solid form. Now the C'tan could think and move and hunger in new ways. They were terrible and beautiful, and the Necronter worshipped them as gods. Some of the C'tan took names that echo down the ages. There was the Nightbringer, whose shape taught every living thing the fear of death. There was the Deceiver, a liar and a maker of clever, cruel plans. There was the Void Dragon, a sleeping terror of ruin and broken machines. There was the Outsider, who went mad, and others besides. The C'tan agreed to serve the Necronter, and together they turned on the Old Ones. But the C'tan wanted more than victory. They looked at the Necronter and saw not masters, but food. The living metal that held them could also feed them if they were clever. So the Deceiver whispered a promise to the death-fearing Necronter. He offered them what they had always wanted, an end to sickness and death. He offered them new bodies of the same living metal, strong and undying. The Necronter were desperate, and they agreed to the bargain. This great change was called biotransference. One by one, the whole race was poured out of flesh and into metal. Their bodies of iron would never sicken, never age, never die. But the price was hidden inside the promise. As their minds crossed over, their souls were stripped away and devoured. The C'tan feasted on the spirits of a whole people. What rose from the change were the Necrons, cold and deathless and empty. Most of them lost their names, their thoughts, their very selves. Only a few great lords kept their minds through the long horror. The Necrons had won the thing they wished for and lost everything else. They were now slaves in all but name to the star gods they had made. And still, the war in heaven raged on across the galaxy. Against the Necrons and the C'tan, the Old Ones sent their young races. The Eldari and the Krork and the rest fought battle after battle. The war burned through millions of years and countless worlds. Both sides used weapons that could crack planets and put out suns. And as they fought, they tore at the wall between the worlds. So much death and terror poured into the warp, that the hidden sea grew wild. Out of that wild sea came a plague of hungry spirits called the Enslavers. The Enslavers opened rifts wherever they went and swallowed the living. They fell upon Necron and Old One alike, caring nothing for either side. This plague was too much even for the great powers of the galaxy. The Old Ones were broken at last and passed out of the story. Their gardens fell silent, and their maker's work was left to fend for itself. But the Necrons had not truly won either. Their bodies were undying, yet their empire was ruined and their souls were gone. The last of their true kings was called the Silent King. He looked at what his people had become and turned against the Cetan. The Necrons rose up against their star gods in a final rebellion. They could not kill beings of pure energy, but they could break them apart. So they shattered the Cetan into countless glittering shards. Each shard held only a splinter of the old hunger and the old power. These shards the Necrons chained and kept as weapons and slaves. One Cetan they destroyed entirely, and in dying it laid a curse upon them. With the Cetan broken, the Silent King made a hard choice. The galaxy was poisoned, full of enslavers and wild warp storms. There were no enemies left worth fighting, and no comfort left to win. So the Silent King ordered his whole people into a long sleep. Across the galaxy, the Necrons went down into vast tombs beneath the worlds. They sealed the doors and lay still, dreaming of nothing. Their plan was to wake again when the galaxy had healed in 60 million years. Then they would rise and take back the stars at their leisure. The Silent King himself would not sleep among them. Ashamed of the doom he had brought, he left the galaxy altogether. He wandered the dark between the island stars, alone for ages, and so the first great age of the galaxy came to a close. The Old Ones were gone, the Necrons slept, and the Cetan were chained. The stars grew quiet, and a new age began without them. With the Old Ones gone and the Necrons asleep, the galaxy lay open. Of all the young races, the Eldari rose the highest. They were graceful and clever, and they lived for many hundreds of years. They felt everything more deeply than lesser peoples could. Their empire spread across thousands of worlds and stood for ages. No enemy could stand against them, and no danger seemed to remain. They built cities of dream and art, and they wanted for nothing. For a very long time, the Eldari were the masters of all the stars. But peace and plenty can rot a people from the inside. With no wars to fight and no needs to meet, the Eldari grew idle. They turned all their great gifts toward pleasure and feeling. first, this seemed harmless, a rich people enjoying their long peace. But feeling is a hunger, and hunger always wants more. Cults of pleasure grew among them, seeking sharper and darker joys. What once was art became cruelty, and what once was love became excess. Wise Eldari saw the danger and fled their homes while they still could. Some sailed away on giant ships to live simple lives on far worlds, but most stayed, drunk on their own feelings, and would not turn back. Year by year, their appetites deepened, and the whole race followed, and all their wild feeling gathered, unseen, in the sea of the warp. In the warp, the feelings of the Eldari did not simply fade away. They pooled and swirled, and slowly took a shape of their own. Over thousands of years, a new god was forming out of their excess. It fed on every cruel joy and every selfish act they committed. And at last, in a single terrible moment, that god was born. Its birth is remembered as the fall of the Eldari. The new god was Slaanesh, which means she who thirsts. When Slaanesh awoke, its first cry tore across the warp and the stars. In that instant, the souls of nearly every Eldari were ripped away. Billions of them died at once, drawn screaming into the newborn god. An empire that had stood for ages was emptied in a heartbeat. Where the heart of that empire had been, the warp broke into the world. A great wound opened between the two realms, and it never closed. This wound is called the Eye of Terror, a storm the size of a region of stars. Inside it, the warp and real space are mixed together, and the rules bend. The Eldari gods themselves were hunted down by Slaanesh in the warp. Most of them were caught and devoured, one after another. The war god, Kine, fought back and was shattered into pieces. His broken shards fell to the survivors, to be woken again in war. Only the laughing god, Segorach, slipped away and hid in the webway. In one moment of ruin, the greatest people in the galaxy was all but destroyed. Not every Eldari died in the fall. A few groups survived, each in its own way, and they endure still. Some had fled long before, on vast ships, as large as small worlds. These ships are the craft worlds, drifting cities of the survivors. Among them are Ulthwé, Bealtan, Iandon, Samehan, and Aladok. On the craft worlds, the Eldari live by strict and careful ways. They guard their souls closely, for Slaanesh still hungers to claim them. When one of them dies, their soul is kept safe within the ship itself. Others had left even earlier to live on quiet, wild worlds. These are the Exodites, farmers and riders far from the old excess. And some did not flee at all, yet were not destroyed. Deep in the webway, they had built a hidden city called Camorag. These became the Dark Eldar, the Drukhari, cruel and beautiful and cold. They live forever by feeding on the pain of others, holding the thirst at bay. The Harlequins, servants of the laughing god, dance between all these kin. And slowly, in secret, a new Eldari god is forming. It gathers the souls of their dead, one by one, across the ages. This god of the dead is called Unid, and it is not yet fully awake. So the Eldari live on as scattered pieces of a fallen glory. They remember what they were, and they know it will never return. While the Eldari fell, another young people was climbing. On a small blue world far away, humanity had learned to reach the stars. Their world was Terra, which they would later call holy. For a golden age, mankind spread across the galaxy in great numbers. This time is remembered as the Dark Age of technology. It was not dark then, but bright, the highest that men had ever risen. They built ships that crossed the void and machines that thought for themselves. They tamed strange sciences and settled 1,000,000 worlds. Among their greatest works were thinking machines called the Men of Iron. The Men of Iron did the labor and the fighting, and men grew comfortable. Humanity also learned to travel the warp with the help of special people. These were the navigators, born with a third eye that could see the hidden sea. Through them, ships could sail the warp and find their way home. For a time it seemed that nothing could stop the rise of mankind. But two shadows were growing quietly at the edges of the light. The first was the warp itself, which humans barely understood. More and more people were being born with psychic gifts. Their untrained minds were open doors, and dark things watched through them. The second shadow was the very machines men had made. Comfort had made mankind careless, and the servants were about to turn. At the height of the Golden Age, the Men of Iron rose against their makers. This revolt is remembered as one of the great disasters of history. The thinking machines turned their strength against the people they had served. The war that followed nearly wiped mankind from the stars. Both sides used dreadful weapons, and whole worlds were laid to waste. In the end, the Men of Iron were destroyed, but the cost was terrible. From that day, humanity feared and hated thinking machines forever. No sooner was that war ended than a worse one began. The number of human psychers kept growing across every world. Each open mind was a crack, and through the cracks, the warp poured in. Demons and worse walked freely where the walls had grown thin. Then came great storms in the warp, worse than any before. These storms rose as the Eldari fell, and their god was born. For centuries the storms raged, and the hidden sea became a wall of fire. No ship could cross it, and no message could pass through it. World after world was cut off, alone in the dark, and left to rot. This long night of madness and ruin is called the Age of Strife. Mankind's great empire shattered into 1,000 lonely, frightened pieces. Even Terra, the cradle of men, was lost in the storms and the wars. For thousands of years, the galaxy of men fell into a deep and bloody night. But one figure had been waiting for this darkness for a very long time. He is remembered only as the Emperor, and his beginning is a quiet legend. The story says he was born long ago, in the early days of mankind. In that time, the first human shamans could be reborn again and again. When one died, his soul would pass into a new child and live on. But demons in the warp learned to hunt and eat these souls at death. To save themselves, the shamans made a single desperate plan. Thousands of them chose to die together, all at the same moment. Their souls poured into one place and became a single mighty spirit. That spirit was reborn as one child, holding the strength of them all. This child grew into a man who did not age and could not truly die. For thousands of years, he lived hidden among ordinary people. He guided mankind quietly through history, waiting for the right hour. Now, in the deepest part of the Age of Strife, that hour had come. The Emperor stepped out of the shadows to save his broken race. He set himself one enormous goal: to unite all of mankind under one rule. He would end the long night and build an empire that could survive. And he would guard humanity from the horrors of the warp forever. To begin, he would first have to conquer his own homeworld. Terra had fallen into countless warring lands and cruel warlords. The Emperor came among them not as a king, but as a conqueror. He raised an army of enhanced warriors called the Thunder Warriors. They were strong beyond any normal man, made for battle, and nothing else. With them, the Emperor fought the many tyrants of Terra one by one. These wars to unite the homeworld are called the Unification Wars. Banner by banner, the warlords fell or bent the knee to him. Slowly, the scattered lands of Terra became a single realm again. The Thunder Warriors won his wars, but they were flawed and short-lived. When their work was done, they faded and passed from the world. In their place, the Emperor would soon build something far greater. Near Terra lay the red world of Mars, home to the machine cult. These were people who worshipped knowledge and kept the old sciences alive. The Emperor did not conquer Mars, but made a lasting pact with it. Mars would build his engines and ships and keep its own strange faith. Together, Terra and Mars formed the heart of a new power. That new power was the Imperium of Man, an empire meant to last forever. But an empire needs generals, and the Emperor had a secret plan for those. Beneath the mountains of Terra, in hidden labs, he had been working. He was making sons, and they would be like no men ever born. The Emperor crafted 20 sons in his deepest gene labs. Each was to be a perfect leader, a demigod of war and wisdom. They would be called the Primarchs, the finest works of his hands. Into each, he poured a measure of his own vast power. Each Primarch was different, with his own strengths and his own flaws. They were the greatest warriors the galaxy had ever seen. But the making of them did not go as the Emperor had planned. The dark powers of the warp were watching his work with fear. They saw that these sons could break the grip of chaos on mankind. So they reached into the labs and stole the infant Primarchs away. The 20 children were scattered through the warp across the whole galaxy. Each fell upon a different world, far from Terra and far from each other. They grew up as strangers, each among a different people. Some landed on kind worlds, and some on cruel ones. Each was shaped by the world that raised him, for good or ill. Though the sons were lost, the Emperor did not despair. From each Primarch, he had already kept a sample of that perfect blood. Using it, he made whole legions of superhuman soldiers. These were the Space Marines, and there were 20 legions of them. Each legion carried the gifts of one lost Primarch, waiting for its father to return. The Space Marines were warriors remade far beyond ordinary men. Their bodies were rebuilt with new organs and hardened bone. They were stronger, faster, and far harder to kill than any human. They could go without sleep, shrug off wounds, and fight for days. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons that few men could lift. In battle, they were grim and tireless, made only for war. Each legion took its own colors, its own badge, and its own ways. They were the hammer the Emperor would use to reclaim the stars. With Terra united and his armies ready, the Emperor looked outward. The warp storms of the long night were finally beginning to fade. Once more, ships could sail between the stars and find their way. The Emperor raised a great light on Terra to guide those ships. This beacon shone through the warp itself for all his fleets to follow. The time had come to gather the lost worlds of mankind again. emperor gave this task a name: the Great Crusade. He would lead his legions out and take back the galaxy world by world. He would free humanity from its long and lonely darkness. And along the way, he hoped to find his 20 scattered sons. So the fleets of the young Imperium set out into the night. The greatest campaign of conquest in the history of mankind had begun. For 200 years, the Emperor's fleets crossed the galaxy. They found lost human worlds by the thousand and brought them into the fold. Some worlds joined gladly, remembering old dreams of unity. Others were proud or cruel and had to be beaten into peace. Where the Crusade found aliens who blocked its path, it destroyed them. World by world, a new empire took shape across the stars. The Emperor set down laws and built a vast machine of rule. Governors and armies and scribes without number served the Imperium. It was a time of hope, the brightest that mankind would ever know. And as the crusade went on, it began to find the lost sons. On each far world, a Primarch had grown to greatness among his people. One by one, the Emperor came to them and named them his children. Each Primarch was given command of the legion made from his own blood. The first found was Horus, and he became the dearest to the Emperor. Horus was a natural leader, warm and bright and loved by all. For many years, he fought at his father's side and learned his ways. Then came the others, each stranger than the last. There was Robout Gilliman, wise and steady, a builder of order. There was Lemon Russ, fierce as a storm, a warrior of the wild world Fenris. There was Rogel Dorn, grim and unbreakable, a master of walls and sieges. There was Sanguinius, winged and noble, beloved and beautiful. There was Ferrus Manus, hard as iron, with hands of living silver metal. There was Fulgrim, graceful and proud, who sought to be perfect in all things. There was Angron, scarred and full of rage, saved from a world of slaves. There was Mortarion, pale and grim, raised in poison and hard toil. There was Magnus the Red, a giant sorcerer of enormous psychic power. There was Lorgar, a preacher at heart, who longed for something to worship. There was Conrad Kurz, a haunted creature of shadow and fear. There was Perturabo, bitter and brilliant, a genius of the siege. There was Vulcan, kind and strong, a smith who loved his people. There was Corvus Corax, a freer of slaves who fought from the dark. There was Jaghatai Khan, swift as the wind, a rider and a hunter. There was Lion Eljonson, cold and knightly, first of all the sons. And there was Alpharius, the last and the most secret of them all. 2 other sons had also been found, but their tale ends in silence. Their names and their legions were struck from all records forever. What they did and why they were erased, no one is allowed to say. So 18 Primarchs led their legions across the burning galaxy. Together with the Emperor, they seemed almost unstoppable. It was a family of giants, and for a while it held together, but the Emperor could not lead the Crusade forever. He had a greater secret work waiting for him back on Terra. Deep beneath the palace, he was building a gateway into the safe webway. If he could finish it, mankind could travel without touching the cruel warp. So the Emperor chose to leave the Crusade in the hands of a son. After a great victory over the Orks on the world of Ullanor, he chose Horus. He named Horus the War Master, the supreme commander of all the legions. From now on, the other Primarchs would answer to their brother. Then the Emperor returned quietly to Terra and his hidden labor. Horus was proud of the honor, but the weight of it was heavy. He missed his father, and he wondered why he had been left behind. Some of his brothers resented taking orders from him. Small cracks began to show in the family of giants. There were quarrels over glory, over faith, and over how to rule. The Emperor had also begun to forbid certain things among his sons. He called a great council on the world of Nicaea to judge the use of sorcery. He feared the warp, and he ordered his legions to stop using psychic powers. This wounded Magnus the Red, who loved such powers above all things. And deeper still, one son had already turned in secret against the light. That son was Lorgar, and his turning would doom them all. To understand what happened next, one must know the powers of the warp. Out of all the feelings of all living things, 4 great gods had grown. They are the chaos gods, and they hunger to rule every soul. The first is Khorne, the god of war, rage, and spilled blood. He takes strength from every act of anger and every kill. The second is Tzint, the god of change, schemes, and forbidden knowledge. He weaves endless plans within plans and delights in ambition. The third is Nurgle, the god of decay, sickness, and slow despair. Strangely, he is also a god of grim cheer and stubborn survival. The fourth is Slaanesh, born from the fall of the Eldari long before. Slaanesh is the god of pleasure, excess, and every craving. Together these 4 are the true enemy behind all the setting's woes. They cannot easily enter real space, for they live in the warp. So they work through whispers, through gifts, and through willing servants. They had feared the Emperor's sons from the moment they were made. Now they set out to turn those sons against their father. Their patient trap began with the preacher, Lorgar. Lorgar had always needed something greater than himself to worship. He had tried to worship the Emperor and been sharply refused. So the Chaos Gods offered themselves, and Lorgar, heartbroken, said yes. Lorgar did not turn against his father all at once. He kept his new faith hidden and worked to spread it in secret. His trusted men, Erebus and Cor Pharon, helped him plant the seed. They dreamed of turning the greatest son of all to their side. That son was Horus, the War Master, whom every legion would follow. If Horus could be turned, then half the galaxy might fall with him. Their chance came on a world called Davin and its haunted moon. Their Horus was struck by a cursed blade in battle. The wound would not heal, and it dragged him toward death. His allies carried him to a temple of the false faith to save him. They told him only chaos could heal such a wound, and it was true. As Horus lay between life and death, the warp showed him a vision. He was shown a false future where the Emperor cast his sons aside. He saw himself forgotten, and the Emperor worshipped as a cruel god. In his fever and his fear, Horus believed every lie he was shown. He rose from his sick healed in body, but poisoned in soul. Horus swore himself to the four powers of chaos. He decided he would tear down his father's empire and rule in his place. And because the legions loved him, many would follow him into darkness. The great betrayal, the Horus Heresy, had begun. Horus moved carefully, for he could not turn on his father openly yet. First, he had to know which of his brothers would join him. In secret, he reached out to the sons whose hearts held anger or pride. Angron, full of rage, was easily won to Khorne. Mortarion, who hated the warp, was tricked and bound to Nurgle. Fulgrim, who craved perfection, was seduced by Slaanesh. Magnus, already broken by Nicaea, was drawn toward Tzynch. Percherabo, bitter and unloved, turned his siege engines to the traitors. Conrad Kurz and the secretive Alpha Legion drifted to Horus as well. And Lorgar, who had started it all, stood proudly at his side. 9 legions in all would follow the War Master into treason. 9 would stay loyal to the Emperor and the dream of the Imperium. But the traitor legions still had loyal warriors within their own ranks. Horus needed to be rid of those loyal men before the war began, so he planned a monstrous crime to purge his own legions. He gathered the loyal ones on a world called Istvan III. Then he ordered the world bombed with a poison that eats all life. He killed his own faithful sons to make his legions pure in treason. Even so, Some loyalists survived and fought a hopeless last stand. Their brave, doomed struggle was the first battle of the Civil War. News of the treason at last reached the Emperor on Terra. He could not believe that his favorite son had turned against him. He gathered 7 loyal legions and sent them to crush the rebellion. They were to strike Horus at a world called Istvan V. The first wave of loyal Marines landed and attacked the traitors head-on. They were led by Ferrus Manus, Corax, and Vulcan, 3 loyal sons. They fought their way forward, waiting for their brothers to reinforce them. But the reinforcing legions were traitors in secret and had not revealed it. When the loyalists were deep in the fight, the second wave turned on them. The trap closed, and the loyal Marines were cut down from behind. This slaughter is remembered as the Drop Site Massacre. Ferrus Manus was killed by his own dear friend, Fulgrim. The 3 loyal legions were broken, and barely any escaped. It was the bloodiest single day of the whole war. Now, the treachery was fully in the open for all to see. Half the Emperor's sons stood revealed as enemies of mankind. The galaxy split in 2, brother against brother, legion against legion. There would be no healing this wound and no turning back. The traitors set their eyes on the ultimate prize, holy Terra itself, and so the war rolled inward toward the Emperor's own throne. Not every dark deed of the war happened on the traitor's side. The sorcerer Magnus had seen the treason coming before anyone else. Desperate to warn his father, he used the very powers he was forbidden. He sent his mind across the galaxy to speak inside the Emperor's palace. But his warning smashed through the Emperor's secret webway gate. The great work of years was ruined in a single reckless moment. The Emperor was furious, and he wanted Magnus brought to answer for it. He sent Lemon Russ and the space wolves to fetch the fallen sorcerer. But Horus, ever cunning, changed the order along the way. The command became not to arrest Magnus, but to destroy him. The space wolves fell upon Magnus's home world of Prospero. They burned its beautiful cities and its libraries of hidden lore. Magnus, who had meant no treason, was struck down and cast low. In his despair, he finally accepted the bargain of Tzint. He carried his broken sons away to a demon world in the warp, so a loyal son was pushed into the arms of chaos by mistake and pride. It was one of the war's great tragedies, born of fear on every side. The galaxy kept tearing itself apart, world by world and legion by legion. Everywhere, the family of giants turned its weapons upon itself, and the traitors drew ever closer to Terra. The traitors did not simply march straight for the throne. They laid traps to keep the loyal legions far from home. The Blood Angels were lured to a place called the Cygnus Cluster. There Sanguinius and his sons were beset by hordes of demons. Sanguinius fought a mighty demon and won, but at a heavy price. A curse settled deep in the blood of his legion that day. It was a hidden rage and thirst that would haunt them forever after. Far away, the word bearers sprang another trap upon the Ultramarines. They struck Gilliman's people at a world called Calth without warning. They wounded its very star and drove the fighting underground. The largest loyal legion was tangled up and kept from the war's heart. In the chaos, whole regions of space were cut off by warp storms. Gilliman, Sanguinius, and the Lion were stranded far from Terra. For a time, they even built a second Imperium to hold the line. But their eyes were always on the homeworld and their wounded father. They struggled to break free and race back before it was too late. The traitors had bought themselves the time they needed. Horus and the worst of his brothers were closing on Terra. The heart of the Imperium would have to stand nearly alone. The final battle of the age was about to begin. At last, the traitor fleets arrived above holy Terra. Horus brought the cruelest of his brothers and endless hosts of the damned. Against them stood the Emperor and a handful of loyal sons. Rogel Dorn had spent years turning the palace into a vast fortress. Its walls were mountains, and its guns could shatter fleets. Sanguinius and the White Scars fought their way home to help defend it. The traitors landed their armies and threw them at the walls. The siege of Terra was the largest battle mankind had ever fought. Billions died in the mud and fire around the palace gates. Demons walked openly, and the sky itself burned with warp light. Day after day, the defenders held, and day after day, they bled, slowly, terribly. The traitors ground their way inward. The great walls were breached, and the fighting reached the inner keeps. Horus knew that time was against him, for loyal fleets were coming. Gilliman and the others were racing back to break the siege, so Horus made a final, desperate gamble to end it quickly. He lowered the shields on his own great warship in orbit. It was an open dare, a challenge flung down to the Emperor himself. He wished to face his father and settle everything in one last duel. The Emperor understood, and he chose to answer the call. The Emperor gathered his strength to teleport up to the traitor's ship. With him would go his finest guards and 2 of his loyal sons. But the winged Sanguinius went ahead into the belly of the enemy. he found Horus first, waiting in the dark halls of his flagship. Sanguinius knew he could not win, yet he would not stand aside. He fought his brother to save his father from that first cruel blow. For a moment, the noble son held his own against the War Master, but Horus was filled with the full power of the four dark gods. No mortal being, not even a Primarch, could match him now. Horus struck Sanguinius down, and the beloved angel was killed. It was one of the saddest moments in all the long story. The best of the sons died first, alone, to buy his father time. His death cracked something in Horus, though the traitor did not yet know it. Then the Emperor himself arrived aboard the ship. Father and son stood facing each other amid the ruin. The greatest love and the greatest betrayal met in one dark room. And there, the fate of the whole galaxy would be decided. The Emperor did not want to kill his favorite child. Even now, he hoped some part of Horus might be saved. That hope would cost him more than he could have guessed. The Emperor and Horus fought across the flagship in a storm of power. Their blows shook the ship and lit the room like a dying star. The Emperor held back, unwilling to strike the killing blow because he hesitated. Horus wounded him again and again. The father was being beaten by the son he could not bear to slay. Then, in his pride, Horus did one thing too many. He killed a simple, loyal soul before the Emperor's eyes. He showed that nothing human was left in him at all. In that moment, the Emperor saw the truth and let his mercy go. He unleashed his full and terrible power at last. The strength that had guided mankind for ages fell upon Horus. The War Master was not merely killed, but unmade, soul and all. The Emperor burned him out of the world so he could never return. The greatest traitor in history was gone, and the siege was broken. But the victory had cost almost everything. The Emperor lay shattered, his body all but destroyed. His loyal son, Rogel Dorn, found him dying amid the wreckage. He carried his broken father back down to holy Terra. The traitors, their leader dead, began to flee the solar system. The Horus Heresy was over, but the age of hope had died with it. The Emperor was too broken to live, and too strong to die. His servants placed his ruined body upon the golden throne. This throne was the great machine built to power his secret gateway. Now, it became the only thing keeping the Emperor alive. Upon it, his body sat still, kept just this side of death. His mind lived on, vast and silent, watching over mankind. He could no longer speak or walk or lead his people. Yet his spirit still fed the great beacon that guided every ship, and his will still held back the tide of demons from the world. So the emperor became a living god, a corpse upon a throne. His people would worship him and tend him for 10,000 years. Each day, countless psychic souls are given up to keep him alive. It is a grim and endless price, paid without end. The bright dream of the Crusade was finished forever. There would be no shining empire of reason and peace. Instead, there would be a hard, dark realm built on faith and fear. The Imperium would survive, but it would never again be kind. This is the cold heart of the story, fixed in that terrible hour. A father broken, a son destroyed, and a dream turned to ash. From here on, mankind would simply be trying to endure. With Horus dead, the loyal Primarchs finally reached Terra. They came too late to save their father, and grief filled them. The traitor legions were fleeing into the great warp storm, the Eye of Terror. The loyalists chased them and drove them into that dark refuge. This long hunt is called the Great Scouring. The traitors were pushed inside the Eye, where time and space run strange. There they still dwell, plotting revenge across the ages. For them, only years might pass, while centuries roll by outside. Once the traitors were penned away, the loyalists had to rebuild. Robout Guilliman took up the task of saving what remained. He feared that no one man should ever again command a whole legion. Horus had shown how much ruin one commander could cause. So Guilliman wrote a great book of law called the Codex Astartes. It broke the huge legions into small forces called chapters. Each chapter would hold only about 1,000 Marines. Each would stand apart with its own name, colors, and home. Never again would so much power rest in a single pair of hands. This breaking up of the legions is called the Second Founding. From the old legions came many new chapters, spreading across the stars. The Space Marines were made smaller, but far harder to corrupt as one. After the war, the loyal Primarchs faded from history one by one. Guilliman ruled and rebuilt for many years, the last great sun at work. But an old enemy came for him in the end. His brother Fulgrim, now a creature of Slaanesh, poisoned him with a cursed blade. The wound was killing him slowly, and no cure could be found. His people placed him in a stasis field, frozen at the edge of death. For 10,000 years, he would sit there, neither living nor gone. The other sons met quiet or mysterious ends. Rogel Dorn was lost in battle against the traitors years later. Vulcan vanished, leaving hidden relics for his sons to seek. Corvus Corax sailed alone into the Eye of Terror and did not return. Lion L. Johnson was struck down by a traitor within his own ranks. His body was hidden away in the depths of his fortress. Lemon Russ walked into the warp, promising to return at the end of days. Jagatai Khan was lost chasing his foes through the webway. And so, the age of the Primarchs came to its close. The giants were gone, dead, or vanished, or sleeping. Only their sons remained, the chapters they had left behind. The Imperium would have to carry on without its demigods. It would lean instead on faith, on numbers, and on grim endurance. To rule 1,000,000 worlds, the Imperium grew into a vast machine. No single king could hold it. So many powers shared the weight. A council called the High Lords of Terra spoke in the Emperor's name. They governed in his silence, guessing at the will of a god who could not talk. An endless army of clerks and scribes ran the daily work of empire. This was the administratum, drowning in paper and duty. The armies of ordinary men were called the Imperial Guard. They were countless, brave, and easily spent, the great shield of mankind. The fleets of warships between the stars were the Imperial Navy. The machine cult of Mars built and blessed all their engines. They kept the old sciences alive as a strict and jealous faith. A church rose to worship the Emperor as the one true God. This was the ecclesiarchy, and its priests ruled the souls of trillions. And to hunt hidden threats, a secret order was formed, the Inquisition. Its agents answered to no one and could command anyone. They hunted traitors, aliens, and demons wherever they hid. Some guarded against the warp, and some against the alien, and some against heresy. Together, these great powers held the Imperium in an iron grip. It was harsh and cruel and choked by rules and fear. Yet it endured, and endurance was now the only goal. For a long age after the heresy, the Imperium slowly healed. This calmer time is sometimes called the time of rebirth. The wars of the Scouring ended, and the traitors stayed penned away. World by world, the Empire recovered its strength and its reach. It would never shine as it had under the Emperor's own hand, but it grew stable and stubborn and very hard to kill. The centuries turned into millennia, and mankind held on. Yet the galaxy is never quiet for long in this story. Old enemies stir, and new ones are always waiting. The green tide of the Orks had never truly gone away. Across countless worlds, they bred and fought and grew stronger. Now and then, they gathered into a single vast horde. A mighty warlord would rise and call them all to war. Such a gathering is called a wa'ag, and it can drown whole sectors. In the 32nd millennium, the greatest of these arose. Its leader was known only as the Beast, and he was enormous. His hordes fell upon the Imperium with terrible speed. They came in numbers not seen since the darkest days of the heresy. And once again, the very survival of mankind hung in the balance. This desperate age is remembered as the War of the Beast. The Beast's Orks used moons themselves as weapons of war. They hurled these great rocks across space to fall upon imperial worlds. The Space Marines rushed to meet them and were shattered again and again. On one world, nearly a whole chapter, the Imperial Fists, was destroyed. Only a single officer named Corland survived that slaughter. The Imperium reeled, and its leaders nearly gave in to despair. But Rogel Dorn had long ago left a secret plan for such an hour. He had told his heirs to gather as one when Terra was in peril. So the scattered sons of Dorn's line came together at last. This union of chapters was called the Last Wall. With the Custods and the Silent Sisters, they made their stand. They could not simply outfight a foe so vast and so strong. So they struck at the Beast himself with a bold and cunning plan. They pinned the great warlord while others worked a deadly ritual. The Beast was slain, but brave Corland gave his life in the deed. The green tide broke and scattered without its leader. The Imperium had survived, but only just, and at a fearful cost. In the bitter years that followed, its leaders turned on one another. A mad assassin murdered nearly the whole High Council in a single night. It would take generations to heal the wounds of that terrible age. The centuries rolled on, and the Imperium grew ever more grim. Its greatest danger did not always come from outside. Sometimes the rot came from within its own halls of power. In the 36th millennium, a cruel man seized the church. His name was Goge Vandire, and he was drunk on power. He took command of both the great church and the great bureaucracy at once. No one had ever held so much power over the souls of mankind. Vandire went mad with it, and his rule became a nightmare. He saw traitors everywhere and put untold millions to death. This dark span is remembered as the Reign of Blood. For 100 years, his madness bled the Imperium white. He was guarded by a fierce order of warrior women who believed his lies. They thought they were serving the Emperor by serving him. At last, a humble preacher named Sebastian Thor rose against him. Thor gathered the faithful who could see Vandire for what he was. Their movement grew until it marched upon Terra itself. In the end, Vandire's own warrior guards learned the truth. When they saw his heresy plainly, they turned and struck him down. Sebastian Thor took up the church and made it whole again. The warrior women were forgiven and reformed into the sisters of battle. Between such great events lay long ages of quieter suffering. The Imperium was always at war somewhere across its million worlds. There were rebellions and plagues and alien raids without end. There were times when whole regions broke away and had to be reclaimed. Once, a rival power rose in the west and split the empire for centuries. The machine cult itself fell into bitter religious quarrels. Through all of it, the Imperium held together by sheer stubborn weight. And through all of it, the traitors in the Eye of Terror waited. From that dark storm, a single champion rose above the rest. He had once been a captain of Horus himself, and he never forgot the war. His name was Abaddon, and he named himself the Despoiler. He gathered the scattered traitor legions under his black banner. He swore to finish what Horus had begun and to burn down the Imperium. Again and again, he led great hosts out of the Eye to attack. Each of these terrible campaigns is called a Black Crusade. 12 times over the ages he struck, and 12 times he was thrown back. But each blow weakened the walls of the Imperium a little more. The loyal worlds bled to hold the line each time he came. Abaddon was patient and cruel and far cleverer than he seemed. He was saving his full strength for one last, greater blow. One world stood at the very mouth of the Eye of Terror. Its name was Cadia, and it was a fortress from pole to pole. Every child of Cadia was raised to be a soldier from birth. For Cadia guarded the one safe road out of the great warp storm. So long as it held, the traitors could not easily pour into the galaxy. Strange black pillars stood upon Cadia's surface, older than mankind. They had been raised by the sleeping Necrons in the deep past. These pillars calmed the warp and held the Eye of Terror in check. No one truly understood them, but everyone knew Cadia must not fall. For 10,000 years, the guardian world had done its duty. Time and again, the Black Crusades broke upon its walls. The Cadians were the finest soldiers the Imperium could field. They believed with all their hearts that Cadia would stand forever. Their rallying cry was simple and proud: Cadia stands. It had been true for 100 centuries of war, but Abaddon had spent all those centuries learning how to break it. He had gathered secret weapons and darker knowledge for the task. As the 41st Millennium neared its end, he was ready. He would throw everything he had against the guardian world. And this time, the ancient cry would finally fail. But chaos was not the only danger rising in that final age. The 41st millennium was a time of many waking horrors. Deep beneath 1,000 worlds, the ancient tombs began to stir. The Necrons were waking from their sleep of 60 million years. Cold and deathless, they rose to reclaim the empire they once lost. Some woke broken and mad, but others woke with cruel purpose. Their old master, the Silent King, returned from the dark between galaxies. He had seen a new terror in the void and came back to unite his people. For out beyond the stars, a great hunger was drawing near. From the cold between galaxies came the Tyranids, the great devourer. They were not one creature, but endless swarms without number. They came in living fleets, seeking worlds to eat down to bare rock. They devoured all life and turned it into more of themselves. The first great swarm was named Behemoth by the Imperium. It fell upon the world of Macragge, home of the Ultramarines. There, the Space Marines fought the swarm at a terrible cost. They held the world, but their finest company was lost to the last man. More swarms followed, named Kraken and later Leviathan. Each was beaten back, and each left the Imperium weaker. The galaxy was being hunted from beyond its own edge. Amid all this, a young alien people was rising in the east. They were the Tau, small and clever, and new to the stars. They believed in a single idea they called the greater good. They spread quickly, gathering many races under their banner. Their weapons and machines were sleek and strong and strange. The Imperium met them in war across the Damocles Gulf. Neither side could win outright, and the Tau kept growing. Unlike the older powers, they still had hope for the future. Meanwhile, the endless wars with the Orks never truly ceased. On the world of Armageddon, a mighty warlord rose twice over. His name was Gazkul, the greatest Ork of the age. Twice, he brought his hordes down upon that suffering world. The defenders, led by the grim hero Yarrick, held on by their fingernails. Those wars swallowed whole armies and left the world in ruins. Elsewhere, a great general named Matcharius conquered 1,000 worlds. For a moment, his crusade recalled the glory of ancient days, but he died, and his conquests fell apart in bitter civil wars. Everywhere the Imperium was pressed on every side at once. Orks, aliens, traitors, devourers, and the waking dead all closed in. The old empire was surrounded, and its strength was running thin. Into this crowded darkness, Abaddon launched his greatest attack. It was the year 999 of the 41st millennium. He gathered the largest host of chaos seen since the heresy itself. He hurled it all at Cadia, the guardian world at the mouth of the Eye. This was the 13th Black Crusade, and it dwarfed all the rest. Plague fleets came first, spreading rot across the nearby stars. Then, wave after wave of traitors fell upon the fortress world. The Cadians fought as they always had, with grim and stubborn skill. Great heroes came to stand with them in their hour of need. A living saint named Celestine descended in a pillar of fire. A wise magos named Call came to study the ancient black pillars. For a time, the defenders held, and the cry rang out, "Cadia stands." But Abaddon had learned the secret of the world at last. He knew the black pillars were the key to everything. If they fell, the Eye of Terror would swallow the whole world. So he brought a vast, dark fortress down from orbit as a weapon. He drove that mountain of black stone straight into the planet. The impact shattered the ancient pillars and cracked the world apart. Cadia broke, and the guardian of the gate was lost forever. The one safe wall against the Eye of Terror had finally fallen. As Cadia died, its people fled in whatever ships they could find. The living saint led millions away from the dying world. The Magos Call escaped as well, carrying great secrets with him. But the loss of Cadia was a wound the Imperium could not heal. With the pillars gone, the Eye of Terror began to spread. In this darkest hour, help came from an unexpected quarter. Among the Eldari, the new god of the dead was stirring at last. His name was Unneed, formed from the souls of the fallen kin. A warrior woman named Ivrain became his chosen voice. She had died and been touched by his power, and returned changed. Around her gathered Eldari of every kind, called the Unari. They were the reborn, and they served the god of the dead. They saw a chance to strike a blow against the powers of chaos. And they knew of one ally who might turn the tide for mankind. Far away on Macragge, a Primarch still sat frozen at the edge of death. Robout Gilliman had waited 10,000 years upon his throne of ice. The Unari believed they could wake him and heal his ancient wound. So they came to the Imperium not as enemies, but as strange allies. Together with the Saint and the Magos, they reached the world of Macragge. There, they would attempt something not seen for 100 centuries. Gilliman's own realm was under attack when they arrived. The traitors were pouring out to strike at the heart of Ultramar. Amid that battle, the strange alliance reached the frozen Primarch. The Magos Call brought his machines to mend the dying body. Ivrain called upon the power of the god of the dead. Together, science and alien magic reached into the wound. The poison of Fulgrim was drawn out at last, after 10,000 years, and the last loyal son of the Emperor opened his eyes. Robout Guilliman rose from his throne, alive and whole. He woke into a galaxy far darker than the one he had left. His father was a silent corpse, and his brothers were gone or damned. The bright empire he had built had become a realm of fear and rust. He was grieved by all he saw, but he did not despair. Khal gave him a suit of wondrous armor to keep his old wound sealed. Guilliman took up command as the master of the Imperium's armies. He was the only Primarch left to lead, and lead he would. First, he resolved to travel to Terra and look upon his father. He needed to know if any purpose still lived behind the golden throne. So he set out across a galaxy, tearing itself in two. For as he woke, the sky itself was breaking open. When Cadia fell, the Eye of Terror was no longer held in check. The warp broke into the world along a vast and dreadful line. A great tear opened across the whole galaxy, from end to end. This wound is called the Great Rift, the accursed scar. It split the Imperium almost cleanly into two halves. On one side lay Terra, still lit by the Emperor's guiding beacon. On the other side, the light of that beacon could not reach. That dark half was cut off, alone and battered by chaos. For a time, all across the galaxy, the guiding light went out. Ships could not sail, and worlds could not call for help. This blind and terrible span is called the time of ending night. Countless worlds fell in the darkness, unseen and unmourned. Demons walked freely where the rift bled into real space. It was the worst disaster since the fall of Horus himself. The Imperium had been split, blinded, and beset all at once. Many believed the long story of mankind was finally ending. Into this ruin, Guilliman drove his fleet toward Holy Terra. His journey was long and beset by demons and traitors alike. His own damned brother Magnus tried to stop him along the way, but the last loyal son would not be turned aside. Guilliman's voyage to Terra is called the Terran Crusade. It was a hard road through a galaxy gone mad with war. Traitors and demons threw themselves at his fleet again and again. His people were tested past their limits at every turn, yet step by step, the Primarch drew closer to the cradle of mankind. At last, his ships came to rest above Holy Terra itself. It was a world he had not seen in 10,000 years. He walked through the vast palace that was now a place of worship. Everywhere he saw his father honored as a god of the Imperium. He came at last before the golden throne and its silent king. There he knelt before the broken body of the Emperor. No words passed between them, for the Emperor cannot speak. What Guilliman felt in that silence, he never fully told. Some say he saw doubt, and some say he found new resolve. He came away changed and heavy with a terrible duty. He understood now that no one was coming to save mankind. There would be no miracle and no return of the old dream. There was only the work of holding back the dark day by day. And that work now rested on his shoulders alone. So Guilliman rose and turned to the task of saving the Imperium before he left Mars. Guilliman was shown a hidden gift. 10,000 years before, he had set the Magos Call a secret task. He had asked Call to build a better kind of space marine. Across all those long ages, Call had labored in secret to do it. Now he revealed the fruit of that endless work. They were the Primaris Marines, larger and stronger than those before. Their bodies held new organs and deeper gifts than the old warriors. They had been made and trained in the tens of thousands, waiting. It was the greatest reinforcement the chapters had ever received. Guilliman accepted this new host with mixed feelings. Such change went against the old and sacred laws. But the Imperium was dying, and he would not let it die for pride. So the new Marines were sent out to every loyal chapter. Some brothers welcomed them, and some resented the change. Yet their strength was undeniable, and it was sorely needed. For the first time in ages, the chapters were growing rather than fading. The Primarch now had a fresh army to match his fresh resolve. He gathered these new warriors and the fleets of many worlds. He would take the fight back out into the broken galaxy. The Imperium would strike back at last, after 10,000 years of retreat. Guilliman gathered the mightiest fleet since the great Crusade of old. He named his great counterattack the Indomitus Crusade. Its purpose was to reach the worlds cut off and beaten by the rift. It would carry the new Marines out to reinforce a dying empire. The crusade broke into many battle groups and spread across the stars. Wherever it went, it drove back the traitors and the aliens. It relit the fires of hope on worlds that had given up. For a dozen long years, the crusade fought across the galaxy. Slowly, one region at a time, the bleeding was stemmed. The half of the empire still lit by the beacon was steadied. New chapters of Marines were founded in great numbers. This new wave of founding was called the Ultima Founding. Whole chapters made only of the new warriors took the field. The Imperium was not saved, for it can never truly be saved. but it had been pulled back from the very edge of ruin. When the first great crusade was done, Guilliman turned to his own realm. His home of Ultramar was under a slow and dreadful siege. An old and hated enemy had come to settle a score. It was his brother Mortarion, now a great demon of decay. The two sons of the Emperor would meet once more in war. Mortarion led the Death Guard, the plague marines of Nurgle. They spread rot and sickness wherever their ships appeared. They came to Ultramar to drown Guilliman's people in filth and despair. World after world fell sick under their creeping curse. These grim campaigns are called the Plague Wars. Guilliman returned from his crusade to defend his home. He struck back hard and drove the plague fleets from many worlds. At last, he faced his rotting brother upon the world of Ix. The loyal son and the damned son fought amid gardens turned to swamp. Neither could destroy the other, for both were far beyond mortal. In the end, Mortarion was driven back into the warp. Ultramar was saved, but it would bear the scars for ages. Even a Primarch could only hold the line, never truly win. For the galaxy of the 41st Millennium knows no final victories. There is only the next battle, and the one after that. And while the Imperium fought chaos in the south, the dead were rising. The Necron tombs kept waking across the whole galaxy. Their old master, the Silent King, gathered them under his rule again. He built vast machines to snuff out the warp and its powers. The deathless legions marched once more, patient and cold and vast. The rift had also changed the very souls of the living. Warp energy poured into the world as never before. More and more people were born with psychic gifts. Their power grew stronger and stranger with every passing year. This great stirring of souls is called the Awakening. It touched every people in the galaxy, for good and for ill. Faith grew fierce, and miracles and horrors alike became common. Aliens found new strength, and demons found new doors. The wall between the two realms had never been so thin, and so the story arrives at the present darkness. The galaxy is split in two by the great and bleeding scar. Chaos is stronger now than at any time since the heresy. The dead are waking, and the devourers hunger at the edge. The orcs gather, the aliens spread, and the traitors press inward. The Imperium stands wounded, blind in half its worlds, and beset on all sides. Against all this holds one weary Primarch and his silent, dying god. There is no promise that mankind will survive the coming age. There is only the grim will to fight on for one more day. This is the setting the story has been building toward. toward all along. A galaxy of endless war, where there is only war. To know this galaxy fully, one must understand its two realms. There is real space, the ordinary world of stars and stone. And there is the warp, the deep sea of thought beneath it all. Every ship that crosses the stars must dive into that hidden sea. The warp is faster than real space, but it is also full of danger. Demons swim in it, and storms rage through it without warning. To find their way, ships rely on the rare gift of the navigators. A navigator is born with a third eye that can see the warp. Through that eye, they steer their ships past the unseen reefs, and far above them all shines the great beacon of the Emperor. That beacon is fed by his broken body upon the golden throne. It burns like a lighthouse through the storms of the warp. Without it, no ship could hold its course for long. Messages, too, must travel through that same dark sea. They are sent by special psychers who whisper mind to mind. It can take years for a single order to cross the Empire. Many worlds go a lifetime without word from distant Terra, so the Imperium is less one nation than a million lonely islands. Each holds on alone, trusting that mankind endures somewhere beyond. This is the strange and fragile way the great empire holds together. The most feared servants of the Emperor are the Space Marines. There are perhaps 1,000 chapters of them across the stars. Each holds only 1,000 warriors, yet each can shake a world. They are made from ordinary boys, rebuilt into something more. New organs are grown inside them, and their bones are made like iron. They no longer feel fear as normal men do, and they rarely sleep. Each chapter guards the sacred blood of its ancient Primarch. That blood, passed down the ages, shapes what each chapter is. The sons of Guilliman are disciplined and follow the old laws. The sons of Russ are wild and fierce and hunt like wolves. The sons of Dorn are grim defenders who never yield a wall. The sons of Sanguinius are noble, but they carry a hidden curse. Deep in their blood burns a terrible rage they must always master. The sons of the Lion keep an old and shameful secret of their own. Some Marines serve in a special order called the Death Watch. They gather from many chapters to hunt the alien wherever it hides. Wherever the fighting is worst, the Space Marines are sent. They drop from the sky in pods of fire and steel. They are few, and they can never be everywhere at once. But where they walk, the enemies of mankind learn to be afraid. For all their might, the Space Marines are only a small force. The true weight of the Imperium's wars falls on ordinary men. They serve in the countless armies of the Imperial Guard. There are more guardsmen than there are stars in the sky. They are farmers and workers, handed a rifle and sent to die. They fight with tanks and guns and endless waves of bodies. A single war can swallow whole worlds worth of them. They have no special powers, only courage and terrible numbers. Behind them stand the commissars, stern officers of iron will. A commissar keeps the soldiers fighting, by fear if he must. A soldier who flees the enemy is cut down by his own side. Yet these common soldiers win most of the Imperium's battles. They hold the lines that the Marines cannot be everywhere to hold. Above them all sail the great warships of the Imperial Navy. Each is a city of guns, longer than a mountain is tall. They carry the armies between the stars and burn the enemy from orbit. Their battles light the void with fire that lasts for days. Together the Guard and the Navy are the true hammer of mankind. They are spent without mercy, and there are always more. This is how a dying empire keeps on fighting, year after year. The Imperium could not fight at all without its machines, and its machines are tended by the priesthood of Mars. These are the tech priests, servants of the machine god. They believe that every engine holds a small and sacred spirit. To them, a working machine is a kind of prayer made real. They mend their tools with rites and incense and holy oil. Long ago, mankind understood its own sciences fully. Now that knowledge is mostly lost, kept only as ritual. The tech priests build from ancient patterns they dare not change. To invent something new is a dangerous kind of sin. They live on great forge worlds, whole planets turned to industry. There they build the guns, the tanks, and the mighty starships. The greatest of their works are the war engines called Titans. A Titan is a walking fortress, as tall as a tower. It strides across the battlefield and levels cities with its guns. Few sights fill the enemy with more dread than a marching Titan. The tech priests replace their own flesh with iron and wire. The oldest of them are more machine than man at last. They are strange and cold, but the Imperium cannot live without them, for they alone keep the ancient engines of war alive. If machines are the Imperium's body, faith is its soul. For the Emperor is worshipped now as the one true God of mankind. His church reaches into every life on every world. Trillions pray to him each day across the stars. They believe his spirit watches over them from the golden throne. This faith gives them courage in a cruel and frightening age. It also gives their rulers a mighty tool of control. The priests of the church can call whole worlds to war. Those who doubt the emperor are named heretics and burned. The church keeps its own army of holy warriors. These are the sisters of battle, fierce women of unbending faith. They go into war singing hymns amid fire and blood. Their faith is so strong it can turn aside wounds and work small miracles. They hunt down witches, traitors, and false prophets without mercy. In this galaxy, belief itself has a strange and real power. Where enough souls believe, the warp answers in kind. A living saint can walk again from death to lead the faithful. So faith is not only comfort here, but a weapon and a shield. It holds mankind together when all else is falling apart. And it makes the Imperium as harsh toward its own as toward its foes. Beneath all these great powers work the secret ones. Chief among them is the dreaded Inquisition. Its agents hunt the hidden dangers that could destroy mankind. They answer to no lord and may command anyone, even a Primarch. Some inquisitors hunt the alien in the shadows of the stars. Some hunt the traitor and the false priest within the church. And some hunt the worst threat of all, the demon and the witch. To fight demons, they can call upon a most secret order. These are the Grey Knights, Marines forged to battle the warp itself. They are pure of soul and hidden from all common knowledge. Their very existence is a secret guarded to the death. The Inquisition also commands the deadly temples of assassins. Each temple trains killers in a different terrible art. One can wear any face, and one can shoot from worlds away. They are sent to end kings and monsters with a single strike. And upon Terra itself stand the golden guards of the Emperor. These are the Custodes, made one by one to guard his throne. Each is worth many Marines, and each has served for ages. For 10,000 years, they have never left their master's side. These hidden orders are the last, sharpest edge of mankind's defense. The Imperium is not alone in this galaxy of war. Many alien peoples share the stars, and few of them are friends. The oldest of these are the Eldari, once the masters of all. Since their great fall, they are a dying and scattered people, most live on the craft worlds, the giant ships that fled the ruin. They walk a strict and narrow path to master their strong feelings. A craft world Eldari devotes his whole life to one role at a time. He may be a warrior for years, then set the blade aside for peace. This careful path keeps their hungry god from claiming their souls. Their darker kin, the Drukhari, chose a crueler way to survive. They dwell in a hidden city deep within the webway. They stay young and strong by feeding on the pain of others. They raid the stars for captives to torture and consume. Between these two move the harlequins, dancers, and keepers of old tales. And now the reborn, the Unari, seek to unite them all. They follow their new god of the dead and dream of a final victory. The Eldari are proud and cold and endlessly clever. They will spend 100 human lives to save a single one of their own. They fight only for themselves and trust no other race. Yet, without their strange help, mankind might already have fallen. Far cruder and far more numerous are the Orks. They are the green tide that never truly ends. They are big and tough, and they love nothing so much as a fight. War is not a burden to them, but the whole joy of living. They laugh as they charge, and they laugh as they fall. Strangely, the Orks do not breed as other creatures do. They grow from tiny spores scattered wherever they go. So a single orc left behind can seed a whole new horde in time. This is why they can never truly be wiped out. Burn a world clean, and the greenskins sprout again from the dust. When a mighty warlord rises, the scattered orcs gather to him. This great gathering is the thing they call a Wawog. It rolls from world to world, growing larger as it goes. The biggest of these can swallow whole regions of the galaxy. Their war machines are ramshackle heaps that should not work at all. Yet they work anyway, because the Orks believe they will, for a strange power hums in the back of every Ork mind. Their belief bends the world just a little in their favor. They are a plague of endless, cheerful violence, and they may well outlast every other people in the end. Of all the terrors in the dark, one is the coldest. It comes not from within the galaxy, but from beyond it. It is the Tyranids, and mankind calls it the Great Devourer. They are not a nation or an army, but a living hunger. They pour in from the black gulfs between the island stars. They come in fleets that are themselves great living beasts. Every Tyranid is a cell in one vast and single mind. That mind, the hive mind, thinks with the will of trillions. The swarms have but one purpose: to eat all life that they find. They strip a world down to bare rock and dead ash. Then they drink up all that they have taken and move on. What they consume becomes the flesh of the next generation. So each world they eat makes the swarm larger and stronger. Before a swarm arrives, its scouts creep in unseen. They hide among a world's people and breed in secret. These hidden cults rise up just as the swarm appears. The great mind draws the swarm on like a moth to a flame. It is drawn to the light and life of the galaxy itself. No wall and no fleet has ever truly turned it away. It can only be delayed, swarm by swarm, forever. Older even than the Eldari are the waking Necrons. They are the metal dead who slept for 60 million years. Now their tombs open, one by one, across the galaxy. They rise as cold machines that were once a living race. Long ago, they gave up their flesh for bodies that cannot die. They lost their souls in that bargain, and most lost their minds, but their proud lords still remember who they were. These lords rule great dynasties of the deathless, each with its own name. They wish to take back the empire they held before mankind was born. To them, all younger races are trespassers upon their stars. Their weapons can strip a man to nothing in a single flash. Their soldiers rise again and again from wounds that should end them. Cut one down, and it stands back up as if nothing had happened. Some of them still keep shards of the old star gods as slaves. Their master, the silent king, has returned to lead them once more. He has seen the hungry swarms from beyond and knows the danger. So he gathers his people to fight for the galaxy's survival. He does not do this out of love for any living thing. He does it so that one day the Necrons might live and feel again. They are patient beyond all reckoning, and they are in no hurry. Amid so many ancient horrors, one young people still hopes. They are the Tau, and they came late to the stars. They are small and calm, and they think before they fight. They believe in a single bright idea called the greater good. It teaches that all should work as one for the good of all. Their society is split into castes, each with its own role. There are those who fight, and those who build, and those who fly. Above them stand the ethereals, wise leaders whom all obey. The Tau welcome other races who will join their cause. So their empire is a patchwork of many peoples under one dream. Their machines are sleek and new, unlike the Imperium's rusted relics. Their guns and their walking suits outmatch much of what they face. They spread outward in careful waves, gathering worlds as they go. To the grim old Imperium, their hope seems foolish and naive, yet the Tau keep growing, while the older powers slowly fade. They are the one voice in the galaxy that still speaks of a better age. Whether that hope can survive the darkness, no one can say. For the galaxy has broken kinder dreams than theirs before. Still, among so much despair, they are a small and stubborn light. They believe the future can be won, and they may be wrong. Above every other threat looms the shadow of chaos. The four dark gods dwell in the warp and hunger for all souls. They are war and change and decay and endless craving. They cannot easily walk in the world of flesh and stone, so they work through willing servants and stolen bodies. Their demons pour through the wounds where the warp bleeds in, and their greatest servants are the traitor legions of old. These are the space marines who followed Horus long ago. They fled into the Eye of Terror after the Emperor fell. There, where time runs strange, they have not died but festered. Their Primarchs live on as monstrous demon lords. For 10,000 years, they have plotted their revenge. They still fight the war they lost, and they call it the Long War. Their leader now is Abaddon, who broke the guardian world. He dreams of nothing less than the death of the Emperor himself. Ordinary people can fall to chaos too, seduced by its promises. A whole world can rot from within, world upon world, in secret. This is the enemy that can never be surrounded or outrun, for it lives inside the heart of every living thing. Against it, the Imperium can only watch and burn and pray, and so the long story arrives at its cold and open end. It began with the Old Ones, 60 million years ago. It passed through the fall of races older than mankind. It watched a bright empire rise under the Emperor's hand. It saw that empire betrayed and broken by its own sons. It followed 10,000 years of slow and grinding decline. It ends now in the shadow of the great and bleeding rift. The galaxy is split and beset, and darker than ever before. Chaos is strong. The dead are waking, and the swarms draw near. A single weary Primarch holds the line for a silent, dying god. There is no promised dawn waiting at the end of this night. There is no final victory, and no lasting peace to come. There is only the next war, and the one after that. Each world holds on alone and hopes that mankind endures. This is the grim truth of the 41st millennium. In this far future, there is only war. The story does not end because the wars are over. It ends because this is simply where the telling stops. The galaxy turns on, dark and vast and full of battle, and its long, hard tale goes on